The mashed potatoes were still steaming when my sister smiled across the dinner table and said, almost casually, "You have 1 week to move out." She said it with the confidence of someone who thought the room already belonged to her. My mother took a slow sip of wine and nodded like the decision had been discussed 100 times before tonight. My father stared down at his plate, quiet in the way he had always been quiet when silence benefited him. And me? I just sat there, fork resting gently beside my plate, feeling the air change around me. Jenna leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs like she was delivering a business announcement instead of dismantling her own family. "We all think it's time," she said sweetly. "You've stayed here long enough. Stayed here." The words settled heavily in my chest. This house was the same house where I spent 10 years caring for our grandmother while everyone else built lives somewhere else. It was the house where I paid utility bills when Dad lost his job. The house where I repaired broken pipes, painted peeling walls, cleaned gutters during storms, and stayed awake at night listening for Grandma's breathing after her surgeries. But to them, I was still just the daughter who never left, the extra one, the quiet one, the one they assumed would always make room for everyone else. Mom finally looked at me. "You'd probably be happier somewhere smaller, Danielle. Less responsibility." I almost laughed. Responsibility was the only reason this house was still standing. But instead of arguing, I calmly reached beside my chair and lifted a thick folder onto the table. The sound alone made everyone stop moving. Jenna frowned. "What's that?" I opened the folder carefully and slid the first document toward her. Property title, 712 East Willow Street. Owner, Danielle Monroe. The room went silent. Mom's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Dad finally looked up. Jenna blinked twice. "What is this?" "The deed," I said softly. Her smile disappeared instantly. I slid another paper forward, then another. Signed transfer documents, tax records, utility statements, every legal filing attached to the house for the last 2 years, all in my name. Grandma had transferred ownership quietly before she passed away. She never announced it because she knew exactly what would happen after she was gone. "They'll come back when there's something to take," she once told me while we sat on the porch during a thunderstorm. "And when they do, I need someone strong enough to protect this place." At the time, I didn't realize she meant me. Now I did. Jenna stared at the paperwork like it was written in another language. "You never told us." "I never needed to," I replied. Dad finally spoke, his voice rough. "Danielle, this feels extreme." I looked at him steadily. "What feels extreme," I said quietly, "is trying to remove me from the home I spent years protecting while all of you treated me like a guest." No one answered. The silence felt honest for once. I pulled one final envelope from the folder and placed it gently in the center of the table, a formal notice to vacate. "You have 24 hours, I said calmly. Jenna's chair scraped loudly against the floor as she stood. "You're kicking us out?" "No," I said. "I'm protecting what was already mine." Mom looked pale now, the confidence draining from her face. "But we're family." I held her gaze. "Family doesn't wait until dinner to erase someone." Then I stood, smoothed my blouse, and walked toward the hallway. Before leaving the room, I paused. "Dessert's in the fridge," I said softly. "Help yourselves. It's your last night here." Behind me, the whispers exploded, but I kept walking, because for the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking to keep the peace. I was finally standing inside my own. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid, because I was remembering. Every birthday I spent cooking while everyone else celebrated. Every repair bill I quietly covered. Every moment I made myself smaller so the people around me could feel bigger. I realized something painful around 3 a.m. I hadn't just been maintaining the house. I had been maintaining the illusion of family. And once the illusion cracked, there was no going back. The next morning, I sat on the porch with coffee while the locksmith parked across the street. At exactly 8:23 a.m., Jenna arrived wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying anger like it was armor. "You seriously hired a locksmith?" she snapped. I handed her another copy of the deed. You should probably show this to the lawyer you threatened me with. She shoved past me into the house. Mom arrived 20 minutes later, already crying. How can you do this to your own family? I leaned against the porch railing. You already decided I wasn't part of the family, I said. I'm just accepting your decision. Inside, drawers slammed. Cabinets opened and closed violently. The house echoed with outrage, but strangely, I felt peaceful. For years, every room in that house carried tension, judgment, expectations. Now it felt lighter. At 10:41 a.m., Dad finally showed up. He stood beside me quietly for a long time before speaking. She trusted you more, he admitted. I looked at him. Why didn't you? He had no answer. By noon, their boxes were stacked on the lawn. Jenna looked furious. Mom looked exhausted. Dad looked older somehow. The locksmith stepped forward. I turned the key one final time. The new locks clicked into place with a sound so small it should have meant nothing, but to me, it sounded like freedom. 3 days later, Jenna tried contesting the deed. The complaint was dismissed almost immediately. Everything Grandma prepared was airtight. She always believed paperwork mattered more than promises. The only thing Jenna left me after that was a voicemail. You're going to regret ending up alone. I saved it. Not because it hurt, because it reminded me how threatened people become when they lose control over you. And slowly, quietly, life began changing. I repainted the hallway soft cream instead of gray, replanted Grandma's roses in the front garden, turned the formal dining room into a studio filled with light and music. For the first time, the house felt peaceful, not tense, not borrowed, mine. One afternoon, a neighbor dropped off muffins and smiled awkwardly. We always figured the house belonged to you anyway, she said. And surprisingly, that didn't make me emotional, because I no longer needed permission to belong there. I already knew I did. Months passed. The house transformed alongside me. I opened a small interior design studio from the front rooms, helping women create spaces that felt safe, warm, and honest. Word spread slowly but deeply. People didn't come because I had flashy credentials. They came because they said the house felt healing. One woman walked through the front door during a design consultation and whispered, "This place feels like someone finally exhaled." I understood exactly what she meant, because that someone was me. I started hosting small creative evenings where women gathered to paint, talk, laugh, and rebuild parts of themselves they thought were gone. Some were recovering from heartbreak, others from disappointment. A few simply needed somewhere they didn't have to pretend. And every time I watched them settle comfortably into the rooms I fought to protect, I silently thanked Grandma. She hadn't just left me a house. She left me a foundation. Nearly a year later, there was another knock at the door, soft this time, careful. When I opened it, Jenna stood there soaked from the rain, holding a small cardboard box against her chest. No designer handbag, no polished makeup, no performance, just exhaustion. She looked past me toward the porch swing Grandma used to sit on. "The house looks beautiful," she said quietly. I didn't answer immediately. Finally, she sighed. "I lost the apartment," she admitted. "And honestly, I think I lost myself before that." The rain tapped softly against the roof between us. "I was awful to you," she whispered. I nodded once. She swallowed hard. "I don't even know why." But I did. Because some people resent the person who stays steady while they spend years running. Jenna glanced toward the doorway. "Is there any way back for me?" I looked at her calmly, and for the first time in my life, I answered without guilt. "No." Her eyes filled with tears. Not dramatic tears, real ones. I handed her the small box I'd prepared months ago. Inside were old photographs, Grandma's earrings, and a few childhood journals I found tucked beneath the guest room bed. "I figured you might come eventually," I said. She held the box tightly. "I'm sorry, Danielle." "I believe you. I replied softly. But healing doesn't always mean reopening the door. She nodded slowly. Then, before leaving, she looked back at me one final time. You were always the strong one, she said. This time, I didn't argue. I closed the door gently behind her and stood quietly in the hallway, listening to the rain. Then I walked into my studio, lit a candle, picked up my paintbrush, and started something new. Because they thought they were removing me from the family. What they never understood was this. I wasn't the extra daughter. I was the foundation. And foundations don't beg to stay. They hold everything up until the moment they decide to stand for themselves.